Once again, folks, Ben Smith, planning director. Can everybody hear me? Everybody back? Dave?
I heard you back there, Ben.
Great.
Thank you.
So welcome, thank you. I hope you all had a little something to eat. I think there's still some food out there. This is the not the finish line, but we're getting near the end of a 2-year process at this point to update the town's 2003 comprehensive plan. And there are several members of the comprehensive plan review team here. If you could just raise your hand so people can, if you look around and see these folks, they deserve a lot of credit, a lot of thanks for the work they've done over the last couple of years. And I'm going to explain a little bit about the format of tonight's session. So we're going to do our best to keep it to about a 30-minute presentation, and we can go back to the other side of the room, the food side of the room, and there's several posters set up, and there's going to be an opportunity to meet with members of the review team, talk a bit more about the details that we probably won't have a chance to get into during the slides here. But I certainly hope if you do have questions, if you do have suggestions, we're going to be keeping track of all of that, and we'll talk about next steps as part of this presentation. So, thank you. And so, if you're in this room, I'm going to guess that you have some idea of what a comprehensive plan is. And it really, at its core, is a land use plan. It is a plan that was required by the state for towns, and it is meant to direct where growth happens in the community. A big part of the plan is identifying growth areas and rural areas, the places you want to focus and incentivize growth, and the places you want to protect from development. And we do have a map in the back that shows where we're recommending growth in rural areas, and hopefully I do see a few of those 16-page plan summaries. You can refer to that as we go through the presentation as well. So in addition to the land use component, there is an inventory, and that's really what makes the plan so thick. It's an inventory of existing conditions, basically how you got to where you are as a community. It details a lot of things like numbers of trucks, speed of pipe, miles of road, numbers of programs, those kinds of things. And certainly there's a lot of policies and goals in the plan to help you reach the vision. So one of the things that we set out to do is meet all of those state requirements, but we also wanted to ask ourselves and ask the community, what else do we want to get out of this plan? And really moving beyond pipes and roads and that kind of thing, we wanted to ask ourselves, what kind of community do we want to create for ourselves, to create for our neighbors and kids, and where are the active places going to be? Where are the quiet places going to be? And what do we need to do to maximize the chances of getting those things that we say that we want? So it's important to note that we've done an awful lot of outreach, heard from a lot of people. The recommendations in this plan are built on all of that public input. Here's a photo of a display we have set up outside the voting locations the last couple of years. We've done a community survey back in 2014, which over 1,000 households responded to, which was a fantastic number. And we've had outreach at Summerfest. We've had a number of visioning forums at the high school and at the Manchester School in smaller group, almost like mini forums or focus groups with other interest groups around the community. And these are some of the pictures over the last, again, 2 years worth of work trying to reach out to folks. How many people have seen the whiteboard videos that the department created, just showing it? How many folks have seen those? Good number. That's part of the outreach. It's part of trying to build awareness for this effort, let people know what we're doing. And as of today, we've got almost 7,000 views on those 3 different videos, which is amazing that many people have had an opportunity to check those out. So, kind of previewing the headline here, there are 4 big things, 4 major policy areas that the review team is recommending that the town and the community focus on over the next several years to move this effort forward. Okay? As opposed to plans in the past where you've maybe seen 120, 140 different goals and a big laundry list of we need to do these things over the next 10 years. The approach in this plan is what are the top 4 things that we need to do in the next 2 or 3 years and start making progress on to help us move toward that vision, with the idea of being able to focus our energy on implementing a smaller number of most important things. So, before we get into that, we have heard, as I said, from a lot of folks. We've had a chance to really look at the survey data, and there's a lot of information we received from the state as part of this as well. So here's kind of the highlights, and this is a big part of what the rest of the presumptions are built on. So the first part of this is where people work and how many people are working in town. Here's some data from the United States Census, and these charts they look very simple, but they say a lot. And the first thing that they tell me is in 2014, back it up just one moment, we export over 7,500 workers every morning. They leave Windham and they go to jobs in other communities. And most of those people are heading to Portland, South Portland, Scarborough. And we are importing about 4,500 workers every morning. And they're coming from Raymond and Gray and places beyond up 302. And if you can imagine what the traffic implications of that are, and try and think about what it would be like if we could keep more of those workers in Windham, not traveling as much, and having those jobs in town. The other thing that this says is, if you look at the change over time, in 2004, we had 7,766 workers. That's the size of the labor force in Windham at that time, and 5,500 jobs. In 2014, we added 1,100 workers, and we added about 100 jobs. And if you can think about what happened in those intervening years, we lost a ton of jobs during the Great Recession, and we built it back up. Windham has recovered from the Great Recession if you look at the number of jobs in the community. But we have added a lot more people. If you look at the next slide, this is kind of a history of population growth in Windham. And I think everybody here knows that Windham has grown very quickly over the last several decades. And what this says is Windham is going to continue growing at a relatively rapid rate. So the last data point on this chart from the census is in 2010. We had at that time 17,001 individuals living in town. And we've got projections that go beyond for the next 20 years. And the low projection in gold shows that by 2030 we'll have just over 19,000 people, and the high projection is just over 22,000 people. So again, if you think about implications on traffic, development pressure in the rural areas, what that's going to mean for schools in the community, one of the other things that is kind of striking about these projections is they're based on the 2010 number. That middle projection of just over 20,000 workers, individuals living in the community, is based on the number of building permits we've issued as a town between 2010 and 2015. So we are already halfway to that 20-year projection after 5 years, okay, on the low end. So it looks like that low-end projection is too low. And I don't know if it's going to be closer to the middle or the high projection, but that's one of the things, as time goes, you kind of truth check these projections, and that's certainly how it's looking. The other part of how Windham is growing is we're growing older. Like a lot of communities in Maine, there's a population shift. Everybody who was 50 years old in 2000 is 60 years old in 2010. And this is what we've observed. This is not a projection of what the future population might look like, but this is what has happened. Those lines being parallel is a complete population shift. And we know that Windham's grown a lot, and that growth is occurring where the lines cross in that 25 to 49-year-old age group. And I think that backs up a lot of what we've seen anecdotally in the planning and code enforcement departments where people are buying starter homes. Windham's an attractive community to move to start a family. It's got a good school system. And there's also a corresponding bump in the school-age population as well. So these are a series of maps that are in the town office. It starts back in 1925, and every red dot on this map is a house, okay? So as we go through these maps, you'll see more and more red dots appear over time. And what this is showing is how development has occurred. And back in 1925, you can see the South Windham Village, Windham Center, right in the middle. And there's a few things up in North Windham. But as you advance through the years and advance through the slides, you'll see how these dots change. There's 1950, a lot more development around Highland Lake, a lot more development around Upper Falmouth Road near 115. There's 2000. And you can kind of see how more and more development is happening in neighborhoods, but more and more development is also happening in these areas of town that were once very rural and now are in transition. There still are rural areas in the community, but especially in East Windham and the South Windham area. 2011, this was a map we prepared back then. It was the latest in the series. And if you look at the next one, all those red dots on the left are representative of the dwelling units, the houses we need to put on this map at the low-end projection that we talked about before. So the question for town councilors, the question for town staff, and the question for people who live in the community are, where do you put those dots? Are they going to be spread out along existing roads? Are they going to be built on new private roads? Are they going to be built in North Windham in planned developments, or are they going to occur lot by lot over time? So the next slide is 1,400 dwelling units, which is that medium growth projection, which seems to be more realistic than the lower end of the spectrum. Again, huge implications on the transportation network and development pressure in rural areas. And then finally, the upper end projection is 2,000 new dwelling units by 2030. And the question that the review team has been thinking about when we're thinking about where growth occurs and where the rural areas, those quiet parts of town are going to be, is what do you do with these dots? Where do you put them? So, the implications of all this are, I think, twofold. The first is all of the issues that the town has grappled with when it comes to traffic and growth and development pressure are going to be the same issues that the town faces over the next 10 years or so. And because a lot of the issues that are highest priority on council agendas and the town office are growth related, we can't wait these problems out. They're only going to get worse over time, and we're going to need to very soon take some steps to deal with these. And this is the point in the presentation, if you've seen this before, where I say it sounds pretty gloomy, but there are many towns in the state of Maine that would love to have Windham's problems. Too much traffic, too much economic activity in North Windham, too much building happening, planning boards too busy, that kind of thing. But these are the issues that we have to deal with because it does have implications on the community's character as we go forward. So in your packets and hanging up over by the doorway, sorry, this keeps going out, is the vision for Windham on page 6 of that book. So one of the things we heard back when we did these visioning forums in 2014 was that the plan we're updating is from 2003. And the vision statement in that plan is pretty good. A lot of the things that we said were important back then are still important. They're, we need to massage and tweak it a little bit and update it in a few areas, but what we've carried through are the distinct areas of the community. So North Windham is the center for the economic activity. Existing neighborhoods are important to protect. Rural areas are important. Another item that is in the vision statement that's not new is balancing growth with conservation and protecting the rural character that makes Windham unique, and those special places in town should be protected going forward. What is unique is where the vision statement we propose and talks about pride in the community, building a place where you can have fun, active, engaged activities, where our youngest community members and our oldest community members can find a place to live and work and be engaged. And I think that's the part of it that really puts the people in the plan that I was talking about before. So as you continue through, the future land use map is on page 8, and there's a big copy over there, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But there's a section called the Tour Through Windham in 2030, and this is what translates the vision, that big, general, broad vision, down to different areas of the community. So what does this review team, what is the vision for North Windham, and what does it mean for South Windham, and how are we going to be thinking about the rural areas in the community? And I'll let you read through that, and we can certainly talk about those kinds of things when we get into the back. The other thing we heard is it's not just what people want to see and where they want development, but we also learned what is important to them. And again, I don't think all of these are going to be a surprise to people, but open fields and working farms are important to residents. People value accessibility and convenience that Windham provides. Residents value Windham's heritage and roots, and there's more detail in the packet. But it was important, I think, to recognize these items as well, along with the vision for what we want the future to be, because it is based on these values that seem to come through all of that info we've heard over and over again. So now we're back to the 4 big things. And these are the biggest policy issues, the biggest policy area focuses that the community needs to work together on in the short term to start making progress toward that vision. So the first one is change the game for growth areas. And we talked a little bit about what a growth area is, but specifically, those are the areas of South Windham, Windham Center, and North Windham. And if we are truly going to be able to focus most of the town's development in those areas, what does that mean? It means having appropriate infrastructure to support higher densities, planning for Windham Center and South Windham, and in a similar way to what we did for North Windham with the 21st Century Downtown Plan, and changing our regulations to allow more housing types, different options when it comes to housing, like apartments and condos. The second big thing, and these are meant to be polls, but we have very limited internet access here. We'll get these up on the Facebook page later. The next big thing is creating a North Windham to be proud of. I think it was the one right before this one they're doing. And this is something we heard a lot about in the visioning sessions and in the survey about threats to community character are how do we deal with traffic and congestion? How do we create an environment where we can have not only more jobs, but a bigger diversity of jobs, more restaurants, more shopping options, those kinds of things. So I think key to this is recognition that North Windham is really regionally important. It is the facility in the town, but it can be more. It can do more for the community than it does today. And a big part of this is continuing to implement the 21st Century Downtown Plan. I know that the council's done a lot of work on this, and thank you for moving that ball along. When it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to looking at, again, regulations and how development occurs. But it also has to do with public open space, too. Part of having a place to be proud of, a place that people want to spend time, is continuing to develop down Bethlehem Park, Shaven Pond, and trying to make new connections, new trails, new parks in North Wyndham. The next big thing is investing in rural Wyndham to keep it rural. And this is a bit of a different focus than protect rural character, because I think investing in rural Wyndham connotes a certain proactive stance. It has to do with recognition that within this planning period, these comprehensive plans look 10 or 15 years out. Within this planning period, there are a lot of large properties that could be changing hands over that period of time. And who knows what they could be. They could be conserved like this farm on Highland Cliff Road. It's the second forever farm in town, and I saw it clicking here earlier. The first one was on Route 202, part of the old Clark Farm property. So by making investments, partnering with organizations like the Land Trust or the Maine Farmland Trust, the town can help ensure that there are going to be working lands and open spaces available for the future. It has to do with things like tax cuts in exchange for conservation easements. There's a state program that allows that, and the town will be hearing more about that very soon. Perhaps creating a program, Land for Wyndham's Future, modeled after a state program where the town can start a fund that can be used for matching funds or purchasing development rights for property. But it has to do with actively identifying and preserving the most important rural areas in the community. And the second part of this has to do with making those open spaces and working lands more profitable. I think there's a lot we can do with the town's regulations so that if you have dairy animals, you should be able to make yogurt. If you grow pesto, you should be able to grow basil, you should be able to make pesto. And I think there are things that we can do to help allow that, make that more of a possibility, because the best way to keep working open space working in the future is to make it profitable. Farms are businesses, and they need to be profitable to continue. And finally, focus on community facilities and programs. Again, there's two parts to this one as well. The first has to do with community facilities. Thinking about what kind of facilities the community needs to serve a very rapidly growing community. I think you could see in the projections looking at 20 years, the town is going to continue to grow. And thinking about how we upgrade and update and perhaps prioritize new facilities is going to be very important. That's a picture of a public works plan that has been and will continue to be part of the public discussion. And secondly, thinking about programs, specifically when it comes to recreation activities. There's been a lot of discussion around recreational fields and the playing complex. Community centers also come up. These are things that we have heard over the last several years and think it's important to prioritize. So it's never as easy to implement your plan as it is to make the plan. And thinking about that implementation part of it is an important piece that the review team's been working on the last couple of months in particular. So measuring the performance of not doing implementing the plan is going to be an important piece of going forward. And thinking about how you measure that. And if you look on, I think it's page 11 of those packets, it has a lot of suggested performance measures for those core values. Because one of the review team members, Sparky, had said, if we're going to measure things, we need to measure what's important. That makes a lot of sense. And people have already told us what's important. It's those things that people really value. So by thinking about how to measure what's important to people, I think we can keep this in front of people, keep it relevant, and it will help policymakers like counselors and staff members measure progress as we go forward over months and years. So finally, as I said at the beginning, we talked about what's next. This meeting is an important opportunity for members of the community to review what we've done so far, give us some feedback on things that maybe we haven't emphasized enough, or things that we need to make sure are included in this plan. And you know, we've also had a number of smaller group meetings throughout the summer, and tonight is the community review. After this meeting, we're going to be making final revisions and getting the plan submitted to the state because, as I said earlier, they have a process where they certify the plan, make sure that the elements that are important to them are in the plan. Part of tonight's activity is make sure what's important to us is in the plan. So we're going to make sure that happens, and the final draft will be submitted to the council around the end of the year, and we'll go through the formal adoption process, and when it's all done, we'll have balloons and drink more bubbly beverages. So with that, I'd be happy to take a few questions. Again, keeping in mind that I was really hoping we could just kind of have a little more food and walk around and talk, and you could mingle with members of the review team for more detail on some of these things. But if there's any questions at this point that I could address, I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, we can just move back and put some music back on. Yeah, there is a comment card. You also got a comment card. That is an opportunity for you to just kind of quickly go through, as you're looking at the posters, as you're thinking about the things that you saw on the slides, you know, does this make sense? Do you see these big things, seem they work? Is it clear? Do you understand what they're trying to say? There's some space for comments there as well. So if you don't want to write any questions or comments on those big posters, you can just write them on a sheet, put your email address, put them in the box on your way out, and we'll make sure we get back to you. So thank you for that reminder. Those comment cards are important, and we're going to be collecting those, and that'll be part of the overall record of the planning process too. Yes?
On the first page, really glad to see making profitable working landscapes. I think for a long time that's been something that has not really been focused on in the rural area. And what you said about making that more possible and profitable, absolutely. Really, kudos. Thank you.
Working landscapes more profitable.
More profitable. Making it more possible for the smaller landowners. Not, great for the big guys, but thinking about those that are small that want to do something relatively small. There's somebody on 202, I believe it looks like, I think they're in Gorham, but they look like they're raising hops. Great use of land. There's a person just a little further down the road that has a whole blueberry farm. Excellent use of rural land. Its extension might be really helpful in terms of working with them, possibly getting more of a production kitchen for products in Windham. That's something that people who are into rural, wanting to grow agricultural products are often lacking.
Yeah.
So things along those lines would be really outstanding.
Get those down on the comment card or up on the poster boards next to each one of those stations. The way we've set it up is use the food to direct people to the things we want them to look at. And there are, again, posters for each of the four big things, and then on the wall is going to be the future land use map. And we're also very interested in comments on that too about Are these the right areas to be, if we're really going to incentivize and focus growth, did we get those areas right? They seem to be carrying forward a lot of the things from earlier planning efforts, the 2003 plan in particular. But again, this is a chance to take a look at it and get some good feedback.
Ben? I have a comment, question to follow up on what she just said. The original agricultural incubator that we had researched, which does talk about the commercial kitchen in the area, and I think Dave Alfanato has had some stuff out there about, refrigeration being the biggest problem for small growers and whatnot. So Ben, is that going to be incorporated into our comprehensive plan along with like the 21st century downtown plan? We're going to mesh that all in the final product? Are we still using that agricultural incubator? Has it gone?
I don't know what the latest is with that specific project, but I know that we've done, I think, and you can ask other members of the review team what they think, but I think we've tried to really recognize that North Windham is very important to the economic future of the community, but a big part of Windham's future, as well as not just its past, but a big part of Windham's future is in the rural economy. And there's a number of things, incubators, freezer space, community kitchens are certainly part of that. Regulatory changes are part of that. So I think that there is an explicit recognition that the rural economy is important. We need to really identify, and this plan does not go that far, to say these are the 6 most important, iconic rural properties in town. The plan doesn't say that. But it makes a recommendation that we do go through that exercise and really get serious about those 6 or 8 or 9, whatever number of properties they are, because what we've seen with every comprehensive plan since the 70s, rural character has been enshrined as one of the keystones. The most important part of the vision is protecting rural character, And every time we do one of these plans, there's less and less of it to protect. So finding a way, recognizing that as a growing community, we're not going to be able to protect every field or working forest or open space, but finding the most important ones, really getting serious about those, are the things that are going to carry that sense of connection to the past and important open spaces that in the future. Patrick, a member of the review team.
Yeah. So I've been knocking a lot of doors over the last 3 months, like going out and talking to a lot of people in Windham, and I'm just going to put these 3 items out there and sort of in order of least important one first and then most important one last. And these are what I'm hearing from people when I go around. So the third item would be transfer station. Like everybody talks about transfer stations all the time. The second one is that they want nothing like what's happening on Spring Street in Westbrook. Everywhere I go, people are freaked out about that completely. And then property taxes, and a lot of people think that's attributed to our growth and everything else. So those seem to be the 3 big sort of overarching, items that everyone I've talked to seems to be concerned with. So we need to address them somehow.
Thanks. Tom?
Ben, for me, the most powerful slide you showed where I hadn't seen them before, where the dot pictures and then with the additional housing units that would need to be placed on that map if you're looking at the growth that we seem to be getting. And it kind of goes along with one of your comments, Patrick, that you heard from folks. And that is, if we put those, just looking at how things have developed, they're going to be spread out all over. Or we could look at doing some developments like Spring Street in Westbrook, or something more close to that, or bringing in multifamily housing somewhere, so that it doesn't spread that all over the rural areas. And I think that's one of the most powerful in looking at the future land use map, in thinking that if we're going to get all of those into those areas, what does that really mean to those areas? And, is our future growth area larger? If we're going to really do that.
Right.
Those are thoughts I had.
So for folks who hadn't heard it, it seems like, these dots are value neutral, meaning some people are completely freaked out when they see a map like this, and other people are very excited to see a map like this. But what we need to do as a community is decide, if that amount of development goes, and this is a projection, the high end of the projection, so I don't know, it's an educated guess. How do we accommodate it? And is there going to be a place for finding a quiet corner of town, or a place to go hunting, or a place where you can sneak off and go fishing in the future? And the flip side of that coin is there going to be a single large development, or is there going to be a place for more intensive development, and where would that be? So that is the balancing act, the tension. We'll go right here.
One of the things we talk about, Tom, is we've identified, I won't say the problems, issues, okay? We've identified some of the issues that fall under the four big things. And at some point, we're going to be doing implementation. We're going to figure out where do those dots go and how do we do it. Like, are we going to give incentives maybe to concentrate growth where we'd like it to be? Or are we going to allow types of development that aren't currently allowed so that we can maintain under those other big things? One of them was the rural character. So how do you balance that? And one of the ways is to create incentives to do development where we'd like it to be.
And there was another question here, and then I think we can take it back.
So my biggest concern is taxes, property taxes. My taxes go up every year since I've been here. I don't have any new services, nothing to do about any of that, and my wages aren't going up. And so, how do we do all of this stuff that you're referring to, but not raise my taxes? Because at this point, I'm not willing to pay any more taxes. And I came from my husband and I lived in Silicon Valley, California, before we moved to Windham, because I grew up here. Like, he's from over there. And I'll tell you what, the taxes in those areas, because of the new growth, because of the stuff like this, put people that are second, third, fourth generation homeowners, they had to leave because they couldn't afford the level of taxes that were being levied against their properties that have been in their families for 4 to 5 generations. So we're looking at a community like this that it's largely rural, and we're talking about the farms. I live right next to Shoot Road, the farms. Those people have been there 4 or 5 generations, and if we keep cranking the taxes like we have been, we're going to put people out of their homes. So I appreciate that we're doing this and we're taking a long look at this and we're trying to be planful in our approach. But part of this has got to be like getting the taxes under control in this town. It's really...
Yeah, taxes, property taxes are a real issue. And we heard that loud and clear in visioning forums, we heard it in surveys, we've heard it in just about every format and the way we've reached out to people. And I think it's going to be important. And one of the more common questions I've heard over the last few months as we've gone through this is, how do you do all of this? How do you pay for all of this? And the answer, I think, is going to be we prioritize the things we want to see. Some of these things do not cost money. Protecting open space, might have a cost, but I think a lot of people also recognize that the amount of services demanded by a cow pasture, 100 acres of cow pasture, are minimal. They don't need police protection, fire protection, well, a little fire protection, as opposed to a house where you have kids going to school and you've got, so development does drive some of that. But one of the things and the challenges we need to think about are where do we need to make investments to start thinking about reducing that curve, because new development has been happening and taxes have been going up. Those are facts. In 2003, one of the goals from the comprehensive plan was they noted that it was 20% of the town's valuation was in the commercial area. Non-residential commercial properties made up 20% of the town's total valuation. And there was a goal to have commercial properties make up 30% of the town's valuation within 10 years. And today, commercial valuation is about 15% of the town's valuation. So we need to think, basically, I think what's happened is our commercial base has grown by this much, and our residential development has grown by this much. And we need to think about how commercial development happens in the future, to make more valuable commercial development. And we need to think about how residential development happens in the future so that the amount of services required per dwelling unit or family, however you want to look at it, are more efficient. And there are ways to do that, and that's another conversation beyond this. But I think that when you look at those dots, it's trying to figure that out.
And I think a big part of that, as we're going forward and being planful in our approach, is by trying to attract businesses that aren't minimum wage, big box store, businesses in North Windham. I think right now we're majority of the new jobs that have come into North Windham have been low-paying jobs, and so that's why people like me don't work in Windham. We go outside of Windham because I couldn't afford to live in Windham if I worked in North Windham.
That's a very interesting comment. Any other quick comments? Tony will have a comment, and I'll check the time while you ask.
You time Tony better.
Yeah. All right. Maybe one more after this.
Back to the four big things. What strikes me is that the degree to which they're interconnected, that making progress in one of the four big things can help make progress in the others. If we change the game for growth areas, if we actually take proactive steps to focus development where we want it more and less where we don't want it, that can feed both keeping rural Windham rural and help create a North Windham to be proud of. So those are all clearly related. I was trying to find a way to relate absolutely all four, but obviously as the population grows, there is some additional need for facilities. So I think they are all interconnected. It's not a matter of, we just pick one and say, well, I'm about keeping rural Windham rural. Yeah, I'm for that. But I think in order to do that, we've got to do some other things. I think Donna hit on something really important before, talking about the agricultural incubator, is that our efforts to keep rural Windham rural don't always happen in the rural areas of Windham. Some of them will happen in North Windham if we have a commercial kitchen, if we have a large cold storage facility. And those things will directly support maintaining an active agricultural landscape in Windham and potentially other areas as well, but the focus is here. So what struck me was the interconnectedness.
Just to follow up with what Tony was saying there is that I'd like to suggest that any rural incubator type activities do not necessarily need to happen in North Windham. In fact, it may be more appropriate for them to happen in the rural area, particularly maybe along something like 202. But what I really wanted to address was when I look at the future land use map on page 8, the blue line that goes up 302.
This is a future land use map question.
On page 8. The land use, the line that goes up 302. I just really hope that by doing that, we don't create another strip of commercial land. We've done that in North Windham. That was a 1960s, 70s land development strategy, and it worked for that time. Now it's more community-oriented commercial development, maybe mixed use. But if indeed we can't move towards something that's more 21st century in that regard, then at least putting in service roads from the beginning, at the very least, requiring parking lots to connect with one another. So you don't have to go back out on 302 to go from business to business. In my opinion, that is one of the biggest drawbacks in North Windham. So hopefully we can change our ordinances so that if we keep this as a strip of development, we also put in place ordinances that allow that strip to be interconnected and not just continue an old development pattern.
So as you look at the future land use map at the station on the wall where the slides are going right now, there's a map hanging on the wall and paper where you can write down some thoughts. That blue area, the blue area on 302 where it comes out of Westbrook up to about Albion Road is labeled as a transition area. So we talk about growth areas, right, the places you want to focus and incentivize higher density, more intense growth, whether it's commercial development or residential development. Rural areas are the places where you, according to the state as a community, you should be directing growth away from. There will be some amount of development in those rural areas, but you should be directing development away from those resources in the rural area. And the transitional areas are appropriate for some level of growth, but they're not a focus of the growth area. And they don't have as many protections as a rural area would have. So those are the kind of in between. And there are a couple of those on the map. That's one of them. So as you look at that map, that is certainly something we'll be interested in getting some feedback on. And those definitions are listed over there to help you think about it. One interesting way that we talked about it at one of our review team meetings was thinking about growth areas as being places that are going to see a lot of change. Those are the places where change is going to happen faster. Rural areas, we want change to happen slower. We want them to be very similar to the way they are now 10, 15, 20 years from now. And then those transitional areas are going to kind of keep going the way they've been going. So they'll get some growth, but not be the target of municipal investments or as many ordinance changes. So with that, I'm being reminded again about those feedback forms where you can kind of circle the thumbs up or the thumbs down if this stuff makes sense. But if you're not comfortable writing on a poster or talking with members of the review team, jot some comments down. We'll make sure that we get those, and if you put your email on, we'll get back to you that way too. So, one more comment, and then we'll just be available for discussions around.
We're listening right now. We've talked all about rural development, housing, and box stores. I haven't heard anything talked about industry. Industry will lower the taxes because that's a high tax volume. The box stores don't lower your taxes. They just increase your taxes. You know, and when you show that map with the dots on it, it appears that I can't remember which one it was, but over half the town would be dots, and the other half the mountain. So you're down. So I mean, I just, but again, we talk about all this other stuff, but we've got to have that industry to offset all this other stuff that you're trying to talk about.
Right.
And so you don't have that.
Thinking about higher value commercial land use sites, thinking about diversifying the jobs so that they're not all retail jobs in the community, that you can have other higher paying jobs, service industry. I know that in the 21st Century Plan talks about having office complexes and having brew pubs and having lots of other things that we don't have today for various reasons. Some of it is market related, some of it's infrastructure related, and those are things that we have some ideas on, but we're ready to talk a bit more about that and hear what you have to say as well. So thank you very much for coming out. Stay as long as you want to, or until the food's gone. And definitely, if you bump into a member of the review team, feel free to ask them about the plan where we're at so far. Thank you very much.